What's up, y'all? How's everyone doing today? So, just a brief rundown on what this is. For those of you that don't know, I have a personal goal this year of watching 500 unique movies. Last year, I managed to watch 455 movies, but only 448 of those ended up being unique. So, this year, I decided I'm going to post weekly videos just briefly talking about the movies that I watched. That way, it'll hopefully just keep me on track. So this year started off with a banger, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is, for my money, one of Jim Carrey's best movies. And it actually does turn 20 years old in March, if I'm not mistaken, which makes me feel ancient. Eternal Sunshine, without fail, leaves me in a puddle of tears every time. It's a very beautifully written movie with the theme, or at least my interpretation, being that love is worth the risk. You know, the old saying is better to have loved and lost it than never to have loved at all. It definitely applies here. And not only is it beautifully written, it's well acted and beautifully shot as well. And the cast, especially for the mid 2000s, is phenomenal. So we have Jim Carrey, we have Kate Winslet, Mark Ruffalo, Kirsten Dunst, Elijah Wood. And again, mid 2000s, everyone's still super relevant and puts on a good performance. And just a fantastic, beautiful movie. And I can't recommend it enough if you haven't already seen it. Then moving on from that, I watched Haunting of the Queen Marie, which I was a little cautious about because I've seen mixed reviews on it. But I actually enjoyed this movie, particularly for the effects. The gore was done really, really well, in my opinion. Now, if the effects weren't so good, would I still praise it as a movie? I mean, probably not as high. I don't think the story was awful, but for me, I appreciated it for the effects, for the gore, and without those, it's definitely not as strong of a movie. So I do understand people's issues with it, especially probably the last like 15 or 20 minutes. But I'm glad I watched the movie, and I would recommend it again for the effects, if nothing else. Moving on to another movie I was kind of cautious about, Marie Antoinette. And the reason why I say I was cautious, so another Kirsten Dunst movie, this time with her in the lead. And I don't hate her as an actor, but like she doesn't do a ton for me, especially being in a lead role. So again, I was cautious about it, but I did enjoy this movie. Directed by Sofia Coppola, the daughter of Francis Ford Coppola, and actually the cousin of Nick Cage. So the reason why I bring that up is, again, I enjoyed the movie, but I appreciated it more after watching a YouTube analysis video about basically calling this movie a self-insert for Sofia Coppola, and how she's considered a nepo baby because, again, her dad is one of the biggest directors of all time. But basically in that YouTube video, it talked about how Marie Antoinette is her accepting the fact that, she does come from a privileged background, and she's not going to make excuses for that. There's a scene in Marie Antoinette where she basically lays her head down symbolically for the people, and she ends up getting beheaded. They don't show it in the movie, spoilers, but yeah, after watching that analysis video, I appreciated the movie even more. Moving on to another movie that, again, had me crying. I do cry a lot in the movies, but it is what it is. The Holdovers, which I made a TikTok about, and for whatever reason, TikTok did not want people to see it. It had it like restricted for like 3 days until it finally posted it, and it's not gonna get any views. But I'm scared to like delete it and re-upload it because I don't know if it'll actually get posted again. But so I'm not gonna talk about it too much. Basically, this is gonna be a movie that I revisit every holiday season. I love this movie. Really, really recommend it. Can't recommend it enough. It is currently on Peacock. Moving on to Poor Things, which I was able to see in theaters, which I'm surprised that it's still in theaters, like almost a month out from its original release date. But it is a great movie starring Emma Stone, again, Mark Ruffalo, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, who isn't really known as like a mainstream director, but this movie is a little bit more accessible than his previous work. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still weird, but it's easier to recommend this over something like The Lobster or even The Killing of a Sacred Deer. But this is again, another beautiful film. Emma Stone, probably her best performance, and Mark Ruffalo, he showed out too. So again, I was able to catch this in theaters. I was laughing for most of the movie, or at least the first half. There is kind of like a tonal shift in the second half, but that's not to say like it gets bad or anything. It just, the comedy kind of dies down a little bit. Now, if you do go watch this, it is a very raunchy movie. I was not prepared for how raunchy it got, so just a heads up about that. But it is a fantastic movie. Moving on to Leave the World Behind, which is another movie. This one is a Netflix original. Another one I was cautiously, or I went in cautious about because I heard kind of mixed reviews. And after watching it, I see why, but I still enjoyed the movie. So it's one of those, it's kind of like a thriller, things are happening in the world, trying to figure out what's going on. But it leaves the reasoning behind it is kind of left up to the viewer's interpretation. It is kind of ambiguous, and a lot of people don't like that. Me, I didn't mind it. Um, I will say it is a little probably too long for what it is, which is funny because I just stitched a video talking about people complaining about long movies. In my opinion, a movie can be long if it earns its runtime. I don't think this movie earned being over 2 hours. It's I think 2 hours and 15 minutes. So if it would have knocked 20 or 30 minutes off, I feel like it would be received better than what it's currently being received. But still not a bad movie by any means. Now moving on to one of my favorite movies of all time, Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix, is it might, I mean, probably recency bias since I just watched it again, so recent. But it might be my favorite movie. So just the silly premise of Her is that this guy, he's getting divorced and he falls in love with the OS on his phone that is voice acted by Scarlett Johansson. So who can blame him? But this is talk about beautifully shot films. This one might be one of the most beautifully shot films out there. The cinematography is insane. The usage of color in this movie is ridiculous. Just wonderfully acted, which is obvious. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix always shows up. But just the story and just what does love mean? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to fall in love with somebody? Is that a choice that we make, or is it just something that happens to us? And it's just a wonderful movie. And I believe this one I could be off because I'm just kind of guessing here, but I think it turned 10 years old last year, if I'm not mistaken. But doesn't matter. Her is a fantastic movie, a 10 out of 10 in my book. And I generally don't rate movies, but if I did, 10 out of 10. Now, moving back some to a movie from the 90s, Man Bites Dog, which I believe is a Belgian film that was just made in French. So it is a satirical mockumentary, very violent, very extreme, about this film crew that follows this serial killer until they eventually get involved. If y'all have ever seen a movie called, I think it's Leslie Vernon, Behind the Mask, it's very similar. That one came out, I think, in the mid 2000s. But that basically kind of stole the premise, I guess. But Man Bites Dog, again, very extreme movie. I think I liked it, but it is kind of a hard watch because it is so gritty and so, again, it is very extreme, especially one particular scene that gets kind of gross. So don't watch it if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff. But I mean, I think it got its point across for as far as how like we sensationalize or media sensationalizes and even praises evil acts at some points. Moving on to the movies that I watched today, Hell House LLC Origins, The Carmichael Manor. So I liked the Hell House trilogy, but really I felt like it fell off after the first movie. The second and third one weren't my favorite. But this one got back to the roots of the original. It was really great. Now I got to move on because I have less than a minute. My first Andrei Tarkovsky film, Ivan's Childhood. I'm going to try to watch his movies in order. I enjoyed this movie. Apparently, he didn't like it after release. Apparently, his movies get kind of weird. But Ivan's Childhood, basically just a war movie and a child going through war. But I liked it, but I'm gonna space his movies out a little bit because apparently they do get weird. And I ended the week with Castle in the Sky, Studio Ghibli's first movie, and I might try to rewatch all of Studio Ghibli's movies this year. But Studio Ghibli, fantastic studio from day one. Just the visuals, the atmosphere, the score, everything was fantastic. And I think the first week of 2024 has been successful. I hope everyone has a fantastic year. I will see y'all later.